Good morning, everyone. I finished grading your videos yesterday, but ran out of time to send you this video. So please accept my apologies for the delay. It was one of those days that simply got ahead of me, and I could not get back on first base. The videos that were submitted were fantastic. I realized that the complexity of this assignment was significant. I asked you to go in and really give a critical appraisal of a quality issue within your organization. And then I asked you to think about innovative ways to address that quality issue that aren't currently in practice. I made you go into their literature and look at new and innovative ideas. And then I asked you to use technology that probably some of you aren't overly familiar or at least fluid with the process. So there were lots of stretch opportunities that may have pushed you outside your comfort zone. My encouragement is that you felt that this assignment was value added to your role as a nurse, especially if you're already in a position of nursing leadership, that you began to think about the other way to solve a problem. One of the things we know about change in nursing is that nurses change by drift. One idea catches fire in an organization and it begins to kind of snowball in an organization. And those new ideas are often not anchored back to the organization's mission, vision, their strategic plan. It just starts to wander. And it often, unfortunately, sometimes our wandering, sometimes it works out well, and sometimes it doesn't. And because we are not as disciplined about using evidence-based practice, sometimes nursing finds ourselves in a position of dealing with unexpected clinical outcomes or unexpected business outcomes because we didn't really slow down and think about what history has told us, what research tells us, what data tells us. And that's the difference for nurses when we think about the evolution of our practice is we have moved away from being just at the bedside following orders to being at the foot of the bed, helping coordinate care, helping advise and advocate for our patients' outcomes, and using science and research to do that. So that's a key step for nurses and for nurse leaders. If nurse leaders aren't walking into their nursing stations or their team huddles or their break rooms and starting with, okay, folks, we've got to change, and let me tell you what the evidence says about the potential outcomes if we do this well. That's the disciplined process that we want to influence change with. So my hope is that while this process may have felt a little wonky for you and maybe have created a few gray hairs for you, please know that the intent is quite purposeful in stretching you and growing you and helping you find a new way to look at something and also use innovation yourself. The complexity of using a voice over PowerPoint and turning it into a URL, while most likely our millennials and some of our teenagers, they don't bat an eye when we ask them to do that. But if you're in my age bracket, the mid to late 40s, my eye begins to twitch when somebody tells me to use new technology, especially if it's not something that I'm familiar with, and especially something that makes me slow down, because if I'm running 100 miles with a pair of scissors and my life is crazy, having to be still and learn something new can feel pretty daunting. So I appreciate your intentional effort to navigate that process and was so impressed with the outcomes. I always learn so much about what's going on out there in practice when I watch these videos. So I appreciate the efforts to do that. If you have questions or concerns about the feedback, please send me an email. The feedback that you have is in your rubric. This isn't something that I can post comments or notes on. So all of your information is in Blackboard in your rubric. So just know that that's there. As we move forward, next week is week 6. You've got your practicum log number 2 that is due along with another assignment. Just a reminder, go back to practicum log number 1 for this course and read the feedback that's been provided. The normal trajectory for these logs is the first one can wobble a little bit, and the second and third one do really well. And it's because most of the time students are good about going in and saying, okay, how can I polish this? How can I make this better? If you're unclear about feedback that's been provided, please touch base. I'm happy to walk through that with you and provide some additional direction. Always remember that the purpose of your practicum logs is to connect your goals and objectives with the actual work you're doing and align it with the ANA scope and standards. So if that process hasn't been planned out from your intentional actions, the practicum log is going to feel a little uncomfortable. I want to remind you that when you did your goals and objectives, you use the ANA scope and standards to develop them. So your goals and objectives section, the 2, 3, 4 goals and objectives that you put in are going to align, if you're doing this correctly, with the scope and standards that you address in your application section. So just be very intentional about doing this. Also, I want to remind you to track your progression. My hope is that you have a printed copy of this, or if you're really good at Word, that you're updating progression in the completion. One of the things you'll be asked to do in 626 is submit a finalized copy of these goals and objectives with the date of completion. So if you're doing that as you go along, that will make your head hurt a lot less, because you won't have to go back into all your logs and try to figure out, okay, when did I really finish this? And the expectation is you're finishing this. So after each course, make sure that you're pausing and you're looking through and asking yourself, where am I? Do I need to adjust these goals and objectives with my preceptor and then get approval from my course faculty to make those changes? Or am I good and am I right where I think I need to be and I'm making progress and I've been monitoring that? So wherever you are, just be thoughtful about that process. The other assignment that's due next week is your reflective exercise number 3. And this is one of those reflective exercises that truly is a reflective exercise. This exercise has you go in and looking at O'Brien's work related to the sub-themes of servant leadership, and there are 4. And I ask you to offer an exemplar for these 4 sub-themes and talk about your own experience, how that experience impacted you, how that experience impacted the patient, and then what your thoughts about that experience are going forward. So one of the things I'll tell you is sometimes students choose to do an individual exemplar for each of those sub-themes because it makes it a little bit more manageable. If there is a significant exemplar or example that you can come up with that touches on all 4 of those sub-themes, I'm okay with that. You don't have to have 4 individual examples through your work. You can just use one. But do not lose sight that you need to go back and address all 4 of those sub-themes and how they impacted the patient specific to that sub-theme, how they impacted you specific to that sub-theme. Just make sure that you're doing all those parts. And the content of this is pretty easy. This is one of those papers that just kind of flows. It's a great one for me to read. It's a great one for you to write. But don't get so into the flow that you don't go back in and make sure that you say what you're supposed to say. And don't get lost. This really is, I think it's the max's. It's 6 pages. If you've wandered over 6 pages, it's because you've wandered. So try to be concise in what you're writing and be disciplined in how you're approaching the topic. Because of the topic of this assignment and the multiple levels of sub-themes, this paper lends itself to level 1, level 2, and level 3 headings. Level 1 and level 2 are just, an expectation with, as you move through graduate writing, the complexity of this paper lends itself to that. Be sure that you properly cite your work. I'm trying to see if it even. Yep, it's 4 to 6 reference. Couldn't find the references. So you've got 4 to 6 references that will go along with that. An interesting thing, when you write this, you're going to find lots of things that relate back to servant leadership. So spend some time really thinking about that concept. I think those are all the notes I have for you this week. If you have questions or concerns from this week, holler at me. Otherwise, I'll just look forward to seeing your work going forward. We are wrapping up week 6 this week. We have week 7, week 8. Remember that week 8 ends on a Friday, and there's no going over that deadline. So if you've had a few off weeks and maybe you're not all caught up, kind of put your head around, how are you going to get everything done, because that week 8 is a short week, so be thoughtful about that. Know that I am praying for you, that I'm thinking about you, that I am here to support your success. Reach out and let me know how you are, and let's talk about any questions or concerns as we move through the remainder of this course. I hope you guys are having a great rest of your week. As you can see, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in Roanoke, it is obviously puppy sleeping hour. Gracie's on the back of my very nice reclining chair, ruining it, which is what beagles do. And of course, Madeline is in the Queen Anne chair, leaving her fur all over my seat. So I will be out with a Swiffer and the little sticky roller thing in no time, having to clean up. the plight of a dog mom. I hope whatever you are doing that you are having a few moments of fun, that you're taking a few deep breaths and you're refilling your well. Y'all take care.